This week on Merchants of Change, we've got Tynan. Katie played college tennis for the Bentley Falcons before starting her sales career. Today, she's a senior account executive with Onshape PTC, a next-generation SaaS CAD platform that speeds up product development. Here she is, Katie Tynan.
I'm J.R. Butler, co-founder and CEO of the Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes and military veterans into becoming a professional salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change.
What's up, kid? Today we got Katie Tynan on the show. Katie, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, JR. Pumped to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for the conversation. So Katie, for some background, we started the show because we were looking to go out and interview former athletes and veterans that have found success in sales. Our company, obviously, what we do is we help athletes and veterans successfully transition, and we really like to hear kind of folks' background and from an athletic perspective, talk a little bit about your own transition, and then we like to leave our audience with any nuggets that that they can learn from your experience in sales. So that's kind of how the show flows. So Katie, I always start with a very broad question. I know you were a college tennis player, but when I ask you to think of some of your favorite memories from your athletic career, what are like the first few thoughts that flow into your head?
Yeah, I think the easy one to say is usually like the wins, but I don't think I remember, couldn't name 5 specific wins. I think the broader answer would be all of my time spent with the team and like that camaraderie, that environment. Being on a team, like there's nothing better than being on a team, going through all of the highs and lows together, going through the hard practices, the trainings, the workouts, the long car rides, flights, trips, whatever it may be. But kind of just being in it all together and getting through that however you can. A lot of laughs obviously are mixed in between, but yeah, I would say as a whole experience, that's like the best memories.
Yeah, you can't beat the camaraderie of the teammates. That's like the most common answer we get. That's definitely what I miss most about sports as well. So totally makes sense. I guess.
Yeah.
When you think about your teammates, how do you think your teammates from Bentley would describe you, Katie?
Yeah, I would hope they would say all nice things, but I think mostly like reliable. I think I'm a pretty consistent person, like just always want to be there, always want to show up with a good attitude despite, challenges or whatever may be going on. And I think that trickles into just being a positive person. Especially when you have a tough practice or the team's losing, especially in tennis, because it's really an individual, but also a team sport too. So being positive for not only yourself on the court, but the team as a whole has to win too. So bringing the good vibes, good energy, and keeping that consistent. I hope people remember that.
That's awesome. And I'm sure it's translated into your sales career as well. Now, speaking of your sales career, tell me a little bit about your transition out of sports. Were you planning to be a salesperson? Like how did your transition look, and kind of how did you end up landing in a sales career?
Yeah, the quick answer is no. I did not plan to be in sales, which is probably how most people kind of like fall into it. But at Bentley, I was a marketing major, did a marketing internship. And it kind of took me realizing that wasn't what I wanted to do. Just being in that and having that real experience, which is great experience and good insight into the professional world. But realizing like, hey, I don't think marketing's for me. Let me find something else. And sales wasn't sticking out at me as like the clear answer. And I actually graduated during COVID. So that transition job market was crazy. So was lucky enough to have a couple people close to me in my life that were basically like hitting me in the face with sales is like what you should go into. Look at yourself, look at how you function. Like that is directly going to translate into a sales career. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll give it a try. Did a couple interviews and landed the position here. But yeah, fortunate enough to have people close to me that knew me and knew that this would be a good path. And looking back, I'm so happy I did it.
Now I saw that you mentioned you took a sales course at Bentley. Did that course do a good job of like
Yeah.
get like was there any like leftover kind of like understanding of the profession from that course?
Absolutely. I think that that's sort of unbeknownst to me. Like I didn't realize at the time that this was sort of kind of having me lean that way, but that course was great. The professional sales major was just sort of starting out at Bentley when I was there. So taking that class senior year, we read To Sell is Human, which is a common sales book, but like a great book and just good book for life. To Sell is Human. So having that experience and like looking back on that, realizing that I did actually like that class and that this could be a path. I think that was definitely played a part in it for sure.
One of my favorite books. We've talked about it on the show many times. To Sell is Human. The ABCs of Sales: authenticity, buoyancy, and clarity. It's such a great read. That's awesome that they made you read that.
Yeah.
When you think about, so you land at PTC, which is an amazing company, obviously, and very lucky of you during that crazy COVID time. What When you think back to it, like what were some of the biggest challenges during your transition into the business world?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like the unknown. Like you don't know, especially I started fully remote. So I started a BDR role fully remote, didn't know what to expect. You're meeting teammates and colleagues online. It's a very weird environment to start your professional career in. So I think that that was definitely a challenge. Once we got back into the office, like everything clicked for me. And I realized that I thrive in that environment. But I would say that being fully remote for me was tough, especially during that time and trying to get a grasp around how my role functioned, like who I needed help from, and asking for help was something that slowly and quickly also became important to realize that that's how you grow, that's how you get better. But asking for help virtually is a lot harder than just being directly in the office. So overcoming that hurdle, I think, was a big one too.
When did you head back into the office for like the first time regularly coming out of COVID, like that COVID summer 2020?
Yeah, so I think it was around like that summertime,
Yeah.
probably after that, because I started in December. But that was like amazing. Everything just clicked. You felt like you knew your teammates, but it's in real life. You're actually getting to hang out and be a team in person.
Yeah.
I think that's just like next level.
Plus, as those that are watching this on YouTube can see, the view ain't bad at PTC's Boston Seaport office,
Yeah.
eh?
Yeah, I have the benefit of having the office is quiet on a Friday, so I got one of the big conference rooms.
I love it. I love it. Now, when like, so you get into the seat, right? BDR. I always tell people, like, BDR is the toughest role that you're gonna have as a sales professional, but it's kind of like a trial by fire type of role. Like, I really believe that it's a great way to start your career. What were you noticing immediately that like
Mhm.
some of the skills and some of the traits that you had developed as an athlete, how were those like really showing up for you when you first did the BDR role?
Yeah, I think there's like two main ones. I think one of the biggest ones is coachability, and I'm sure a lot of people say this, like in sports and also in the professional world, especially in sales, like you have to be able to take hard feedback, and becoming comfortable with that very early on is super important. And like it doesn't feel great at first. It's kind of a new environment. You're in the professional world, but you also have to take hard feedback. So accepting that and knowing that that's going to make you better um, ultimately like was a big thing for me to realize early on. Um, and then I would say just grit overall. Like you have to, same in sports, like you have to be 110% in. You always have to be showing up. If you put in 110% in all of the inputs, like that's going to pay off at the end of the day. So realizing that early on, I almost like gamified it with myself, especially in the BDR role. Like it's very metrics based. So I realized, if I'm getting in early, if I'm doing more, if I'm staying late, like it's just going to pay off. So realizing that early was super important for me.
I'm always curious about this, right? I played like full team sports my whole life, right? Since like my late 20s, I've gotten much bigger into golf. And like, I also totally appreciate that ultimately playing tennis at the level that you did, you're still on a team. Like overall points matter for the whole team to win. But like at the end of the day, you're largely on the court by yourself, much like a golfer in the sense that like you don't go into the locker room like in between periods and get a pep talk or between points. Like you've got to kind of really have like positive self-talk as somebody who's on that court alone. Have you found that come into play for you, like especially selling as a BDR, and then you've the last couple of years have been a tough market. Do you see that positive mind talk is kind of helping you in your career now?
Absolutely. Like I would say that mental toughness in tennis or like golf, I would say that those two, like it's so important to have, and it's not easy at all. And I wasn't the most mentally tough player. Like I struggled with that a lot. And even in the professional world, like it's hard. Like you're going to, you're going to be in these lows and you have to find a way to get out of it. Like winning's great. You're going to win, like the wins will come, but you learn a lot more from the losses, from the mistakes, from failing fast. So taking that in stride and learning from it is really important. And it's like easy to say, but to do in practice too is really tricky. So reminding yourself that like it is a job, like you get out of it what you put into it. So just work hard and like good stuff will happen, good stuff will come. And just controlling what you can control in tennis, in a sport, in work, it's really all the same.
So good. I couldn't agree more. That's a great answer. Now you're 4 years out now, so I imagine that you're starting to get the connection through your coach and folks that went to Bentley or folks from your network that are getting out of college athletics themselves. What does the conversation look like, Katie, if a senior from Bentley calls you from the tennis team and she says like, hey Katie, I'm thinking about trying sales out. Like, how are you coaching that person? What does that conversation look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's easy to look back on now that I was in that sort of uncertainty and that in that period of being in limbo and not knowing what I wanted to do. I would say for me, it came down to knowing how I saw success in a sport and that directly translating into how I see success in sales. So the same method of for what you put in, like you'll get out, like that's the same. So having whoever that athlete may be, like take a look at how you find success in your sport, in schoolwork, whatever it may be. If that's, working hard, wanting to win and having a desire to win and doing whatever it takes to get there, then sales is probably a good avenue for you. So I'd say that that's a big thing. And just like the overall metrics of like just being excited to like go to practice, do all of those things. Like that's the same thing as going into work, working hard, like it's going to pay off, but making that exciting in its own way. Like if that's something that can get you out of bed every day, then definitely sales would be for them.
Do you think that financial motivation is like an important part of, like, you talked about some of the intangibles, but like where do you feel like, how would you rank like the want or the need to like really make good money? Like, is that a factor that you would test with like a younger person, you think?
That's huge. I think it's huge for every salesperson. I'd be surprised if you ask a salesperson if that's like not important to them. but it's not the most important piece to me. But having that in the back of my mind, knowing that like what I put into it, like I'm going to see the results from it in that sense, that's huge. So I think it's
Yeah.
important for everyone. It's a small piece of importance for me, but if someone's motivated that way, like that'll like make them want to do better every day. And if that's something that makes them, feel accomplished, then that's good.
Yeah, the way I think about it is like, you remember your first year and a half being a BDR. It's so hard, and then like
Yeah.
the stress of carrying a number and a quota and like starting at zero in your role basically every 90 days,
Yeah.
like just the sheer pressure that it comes with. I tell people like, listen, if you're okay with like a mediocre salary and like not you don't need a lot, like maybe don't do sales.
Yeah.
Maybe save yourself
If you're
some
good
added.
with that, then just, yeah, stick with it. But that to me, just like knowing coming into work and knowing what I'm making every year, like that's not exciting. Um, the little bit of like variability and like that unknown is exciting to me.
Oh yeah.
And to most salespeople, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I just think if it's the worst, it's the worst profession if you're okay making a mediocre salary. It's the best profession if you want to make a lot of money and you want to control your ability to do so, right? What like if you take a step back now that you've been in the seat for a while
Mhm.
and you've learned a lot about it, you've obviously been promoted. What do you love about sales now, Katie? Like, how are you meet a kid, they clearly are the right intangibles, but they're still kind of on the bubble. What are you telling them about the career that really pushes them over the edge to give it a shot?
Yeah, I think within the job itself, like I get to do something really cool. I help really cool companies bring products to market, and I'm helping people every day determine some type of business value and solve real problems. Um, that's like what we're doing. But within the role, I think the most interesting and exciting thing to me is like you're always learning. You will never be 100% perfect or good at sales or good in your role. Like there's always more that you can be doing. To me, that's exciting. That's what gets me up and excited, ready to go to work every day. Like almost having that sort of rookie mentality at all times of knowing like, hey, I need to like act like I'm new at this at all times. I'm never gonna have it all figured out, because once you feel like that, like it's not a good spot to be in. So having that curiosity, always asking questions, always wanting to do more and like get better, that's exciting to me, and I'm sure anyone that plays a sport would find the same enjoyment in that type of challenge.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think complacency is the enemy, right? Like when you really want to grow and build your career, that's where careers go to die, is when you become complacent. Um, what I so you've been on a pretty solid fast track at PTC, and I think anybody listening has, especially my age, really understands what that pedigree means in terms of, you know, growing up at PTC and all the great leadership that's there now, that's been there in the past, and a lot of the best practices, candidly, to sell software that were born in the four walls of PTC, which is like such a great legacy to be a part of. Um, Looking back now, and this is a little bit of a trick question because that I know your leader, but like, what do you, that same senior, what are the characteristics of like that great first opportunity? Like you got really lucky where you landed. What do you think? Like when you look at the characteristics of PTC that made it a great spot for you, what are those bullets that you're telling that Bentley senior? Like, make sure the company you go to checks these boxes. These are the most important boxes.
Yeah. I think there's probably like two main ones, people and product. Like
Yep.
you have to, I interviewed for a couple sales jobs, and it was just, I knew that if I was selling that, like I wasn't going to be excited about it. But interviewing for Onshape, interviewing at PTC, like that's something that's so real and impactful in everybody's day-to-day life. So having a really good product that you're excited to sell is super important because it makes that job so much more authentic. Like you're selling something that you truly believe in. So I think product is huge. You have to be excited to sell what you're selling. And I think the rest of it will naturally follow. But the biggest piece I would say is definitely the people. For me, that's always been leadership, like having phenomenal management, phenomenal mentors. Especially, I always say to people, I'm so lucky that I'm still at my first job out of college, because that's rare. Like a lot of my friends have bounced around to different companies, different roles. But being here and having leaders in management that you want to show up for, you want to work hard for, you would like literally do anything for, that's super important, and that makes it exciting. That makes, being together in person in the office awesome. And it just creates such a good environment. So I'd say people is definitely the biggest one, for me.
It's honestly like it's not unlike choosing a college based off the coach that you get to go play for. You
Totally.
know what I mean? Like it's the thing that I always tell people is like because we, as you can imagine, Katie, right? We have our folks are interviewing at multiple places, and usually their decisions they're making sometimes they're like, well, this base salary is 5,000 higher, and
Mm-hmm.
this one is fully remote, this one's hybrid. And I always, one, like I do believe there's value in getting the office, which you've seen since the start at PTC. But I also think like that's getting wrapped around the axle on those details misses the point that like you have to go work for someone that you admire, that you feel like you can learn from, that you feel like is going to make you better a year, 2 years down the road than when you walk in the door. And it sounds like that's what you found at PTC with the leadership.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm super lucky. Like PTC itself as a company invests in people so heavily, and especially on our team, management invests in its people, the team, and creates a really great environment to be a part of. So it makes it a no brainer and makes it easy, but that is hard to kind of suss out in an interview environment or when you're first looking for a job. So I would say that to me would be an important piece of getting a feel for what management is like, who are the types of people that you want to work for, that type of thing.
Totally. I want to pull on the product string a little bit because I know what you meant, but I want to not necessarily challenge you, but I want to clarify. I think it's safe to say, Katie, that you aren't passionate about CAD software. Okay, right? Like, is that a fair? Okay, okay.
Hand up. Hand up. Yep.
And
Not an engineer.
but it sounds like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you did during the interview process is you understood not so much the bits and bytes and the speeds and feeds and the features and functionality of what Onshape does, but what outcomes and like what problems it solves for clients, and that's really what got you excited. Am I kind of positioning that statement about product correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah. It wasn't just because we sell CAD to engineers. It was more so like the impact and the types of companies that we sell to and PTC sells to as a whole.
Yeah,
Like some of the world class medical devices, like products that actually change people's lives.
yeah,
Like the robotics industry is so cool.
yeah,
The companies that we sell to are just cool, awesome companies and awesome technologies. So that makes it exciting. Um, but the CAD itself, like that's such a small part of it. It's like who we
yeah.
impact, and makes that process a lot easier.
Yeah, plus the opportunity, right? Like anything you can hold in your hand is at some point has like been impacted by what you guys do. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because we have some like fairly technical, complex customers, and we have like a college football player who's like, man, like I don't know anything about technology. Like I don't know if I can get passionate about selling software. And my talk track is like, don't think about the software itself and what it does and how it works. Think about how important software is in general in your life, right? And folks that are coming out of school now, I mean, they were like 7 years old when the iPhone came out, so they really understand.
Yeah.
They almost can't do anything without software that they do on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
But it's really about like that value that you can bring to like amazing organizations, like you talk about med device and healthcare, and you know, this just that opportunity that it creates when companies invest in your technology is really special, and that's what you have to get. Like candidly, that's what you have to get excited about, because you're not technical, so you can't really dig into the weeds on like why the software is so cool necessarily, right?
Exactly. Yeah, knowing that you are going to make a business better off by selling to them makes it that much more authentic. You're excited about it. You know that you're actually helping someone. Makes the job so much easier.
Totally. Now we likely have a lot of listeners that have already been through our program and are about to start new roles. Some maybe even at PTC. So imagine you're speaking, Katie, right now to your future BDR. What advice would you give to somebody that's about to start their first BDR job on Monday? How would you implore them to go into the role from like a mindset perspective, but also from like their first 30 days? What should they be focused on?
Yeah, I think a big thing for me, especially being remote when I first started here, was getting to know the people that you're working with. That's super important, and just being genuinely curious about their path. How did they get here? What did their transition look like if it was from BDR to AE? Getting to know like a holistic view of the team that you're working on helps you not only understand the team, but the business better. So that was really helpful for me in seeing, you know, where everyone's role fits in, who I would be working closely with. Getting to know those people that you're going to be the closest to early on, I think is really important. And I had a great, you know, some great mentors early on, always telling me like, you want to be the person that the buzz is around. Like, you want people to say like, what's Katie up to? What is she doing? Like, you want people to know who you are, what you're doing, and the effort that you're putting in. So I think I'm thankful for that advice, because I made sure that that was a thing. When I first started, and being remote, that was hard. And getting in the office, like having that mentality and always feeling curious, like you need to always learn more, is super important. Back to some of my similar answers too, just always not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to ask the dumb question, like not being afraid to feel new, and just be curious overall. Like that's going to help you. The second that you feel like you have it figured out, or you're like, all right, I'm getting in some type of groove, like there's going to be something difficult that comes along. So having that natural curiosity, I think, goes a huge way, especially when you're new at any job.
That's like the best advice ever, Katie. Great job. Like we talked about ABCs from the book, but I really think the ABCs of early career sellers is always be curious. That's if you do that, the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be okay with failing too. Like the sooner you fail, and if you fail fast, like I was always told that if you fail fast, it's going to be so beneficial down the road. Like you have to be okay with messing up, with doing the wrong thing, and getting feedback around that. And as soon as you're okay to accepting that, like it's going to make you so much better. So it's easy to say now in this position, and it's not always easy to take that feedback or realize that, especially when you're first starting out as a BDR. But I think that's huge, especially as you grow into like an actual selling role.
Absolutely. Now I'm going a little off script here, but I think this is pretty powerful, because you're in like a little bit of a shorter window from a career perspective compared to some guests we've had in the past, and you're still relatively close to your time as a BDR. Now you're a quota carrying account executive. And by the way, this will be a great recording for you to go back to in like 10 years when you're absolutely crushing it as an enterprise salesperson to remind yourself, what does a good BDR AE relationship look like? And tell me kind of from both perspectives, since you're close to both perspectives. Can you talk through that a little bit? I think that's a really good nugget for our audience.
Yeah, totally. So like that teamwork between the BDR and AE. Yeah. I think it definitely has to be a 50-50 relationship first and foremost. Like you have to take a look at yourself and say, hey, I was in those shoes at one point. Like, that job is hard. That job can be not that fun at times. But realizing that they're ultimately trying to help you at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and always wanting to work together towards, like, we're all working towards the same goal. So really having that like teammate mentality and like 50-50 back and forth is super important. Never having the mentality of like, oh, the BDR is supposed to book me meetings, like I'll just leave them off to their own and like have them just do the hard work. Like, you also are doing the hard work, do the hard work with them. Like, don't make them do something that you wouldn't do. So making sure that you're always having that open communication, I think, is really important. um, Especially just knowing that you were in that spot at one point.
Totally, totally. I've seen it. I've seen the movie so many times where a BDR gets promoted to AE, and initially it's awesome because they're like they're still wearing their BDR hat a little bit, so they're
Oh yeah.
leaning in really closely. And then you follow up with that rep 5 years down the road, and they're like treating their BDR like, one, that they work for them, and two, like
Yep.
just like kind of not really throwing them the bones and engaging with them the way that they should. And they're like, I'm so busy. So like keep it. I'm just telling you, I'm going to be sending this clip to you when I see that enterprise account executive promotion that you get in a couple of years. Okay.
Yeah, you always have to remember where you started, and I think that's important for sure.
100%. 100%. This question is the last question, Katie. You've given us so much time. Thank you so much. We ask every guest this question, but essentially, people always ask me, JR, how come you just focus on athletes and veterans? And my answer is always because they know what it means to be dialed in, and I think that's really what it takes to be wildly successful in this profession of B2B sales, whether that's tech or any other industry that you sell big ticket items to large organizations. So the question is, what does being dialed in as a sales pro, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think maybe a more personal answer to me, like when I feel 100% dialed in, my routine to me is everything. And I think having a routine as a salesperson is wildly important because it's very easy to get caught up in your job, make it your whole life. Like, it's hard work. So having other things that you do besides, coming into work every day. So for me, that's waking up at an ungodly hour in the morning, working out, doing my routine of working out, sauna, cold plunge, that's my time. If I do that, like, I know that I can then show up as myself and like be ready to take on the day. So I'm dialed in that day. On days that I don't do that, like, I don't feel dialed in and I don't feel like I'm bringing it. Similar to in sports, right? If you're not going to put 100% into practice, if you're not putting in all of the effort, you're going to fall flat in a match. You're going to lose. So being dialed in to me correlates directly to my routine. If I'm firing on all cylinders, that means my routine is happening. It's there, which it always isn't, but when it is, it's good.
I love it. I love it. Katie, this was such a good conversation. Thank you so much for giving us the time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.